Outer Orange.
Привет. Hello, fam. You know what time it is. I know what time it is. It is results time. That's right. Welcome back to another, I guess, weekly update of what's going on in results. And because we're in that time period of things being like, things happening. So it's quite a bit. We're gonna go through. I think there's 5 different events that happened, maybe 4. It might be 4 actually. But we had 3 BSFs happen. We had 1 Japan WGP happen. So we're gonna be looking at those. So let's go ahead and get started. So this was basically what the set. This is set 10 with Festival Collection. This is the results that were. This is basically what happened for the Osaka 2023 Deluxe. So this is what it looks like. There's a lot of Ballista, Gandiva, Ibisu, like the usual. And then Jet, and then Hexorb has been showing basically kind of similar to what we've seen in the past. Hasn't changed too much. For what I'm seeing, it's basically the same. There's a couple like more roguey decks. And then this is block A. That was block B. This is block A. Basically kind of the same. The only difference is this one has a little bit more Jet. You'll notice that there's like very little Ava in these, but overall about the same. Basically, again, Diva, Jet, Ballista, Ibisu, Hexorb, and then the rest are kind of like all in that same. This entire ballpark right here all makes sense. It's all just like pretty competitive decks, and you have like a little bit more of the rogue stuff, and then you have like the Zorga starting to come through, and very exciting stuff because we did have like an MOB, I believe, also top. I believe it was Chris himself that topped with the MOB list. It might be on this one. I'm not exactly sure where or what event it was. I just know Chris competed and he got his like top 8 MOB, so congrats to that. But basically, yeah, this is the results for that. I don't think we have like anything. Oh, we do. This is block B. They're kind of opposite, but it's okay. So business block B, like this is the top 4 results that basically happened. So lo and behold, pretty much the best decks kind of just pushed through. We had 1 Avangandia kind of break it through, but overall we're starting to see that Ballista pretty much took the spot of where Ava was, and now it's just like Jet, Ibisu, Messiah, and Ballista, and again Diva and Youthberg as like the top options, and that which all makes sense. Obviously all the decks are pretty strong and this meta is very diverse. There's a lot of different decks that perform really well, so honestly this is pretty expected. I think with Festival Collection it made Ballista just better, and I think Zorga started kind of falling off a little bit. I think Ballista's just really fast and Zorga's pretty fast. I think Ballista's faster. I haven't like fully tested everything, but from what I've been hearing, people that have been testing the deck, that's pretty much what they've been saying, is that Ballista it's just a very fast deck and kind of just goes crazy. And it's very powerful, so we'll have to see exactly sort of what that's looking like. We're about to get set 10 in the English side of things in about a week and a half, so we're about to get that Diva and the Messiah end of it, along with some updates to current decks with the Masks and Zorga coming out. But we don't have Ibisu or Ballista. Ibisu won't ever happen, but we don't have Ballista because that's Festival Collection stuff, so I have to see sort of where all that comes through. And we also have the new over triggers and stuff kind of playing into all this, so it's just a very interesting format that we're starting to kind of see here kind of develop a little bit by bit, you know. And then here we have Hexorb, but the Hexorb side of things, or here's the block A, and this one's a little bit more, you know, a little bit more diverse, a little bit more different stuff. We did have an Ava get through first place, so that's really nice to see, since the other block didn't have any Ava results as far as I know. And then obviously get Diva Ibisu. We do have the Hexorb, it's still not a deck I personally tested, but I hear good stuff about it, so I'm glad it's performing well. And then we have the Jejuled Overlord Jets, and then we have another Hexorb, Gandiva, and Avangandia. It's nice to see that Avangandia is doing well. I actually really want to try that deck. I've tried the current version of it, which is very like behind right now. It needs more stuff, but with the Freiheit and everything. But it would be interesting to kind of see like a future of it. But that's over in JP said. They're a little meta forward. So let's go back a little bit and look at our meta, which is the English meta, and see sort of what that's looking like. Starting with Newark Standards. So this is Newark BSF that just happened, and here we have 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place. We have Jet and PBO along with Ava topping. Now, if you guys remember, a very long time ago, by very long time ago, I mean literally the last time I did a set review of like what will potentially top, I did put PBO on the list, and surprisingly enough, nobody really judged me too hard on it. Not as hard as the Flagberg a while back, but like a year ago, but I did say PBO is actually a very good contender, and actually I am curious to see how they built this out. I assume it's probably built with the new promos in mind. The deck can go pretty crazy, so that's basically the best way to put it. The new promo is actually insane, and as I expected, this is a pretty standard list. There's what I was saying earlier was I didn't expect there to be any like cope cards, and by cope cards I mean like cards that just don't work with the formula of the deck, or trying to put too much in a deck. Some people try to put like a bunch of maples in to kind of make it work. I think standard is pretty good, and this is basically standard. So you want to pretty much run the 2 new promos because they're both insanely strong. This is kind of for someone who's heavily tested this deck. This is one of those decks that I've been testing pretty much since when the new blaster dropped is basically when I started testing this deck. So I have a lot of knowledge on it. But overall, I think this deck can steamroll really crazy. You do have to mulligan a little bit heavy with it. Your mulligan is very important as you don't directly search for anything. Your best searcher is this card, but that's basically it. Everything else you have to pretty much hard draw into with like cards like the main. So you really need to hope that you find everything. The other thing is in case your opponent bottom decks your Blaster Dark, you get very stuck if it's the Riot deck one specifically, which is why you'll notice here that they're running extra Blaster Darks in the actual deck as well, which is very smart, by the way. You want to do this because if it gets bottom decked, you get stuck. Like, yeah, you have the promo, but that's only when your opponent is grade 3 or greater, and that's under the circumstances that you have all your stuff or your pieces ready to set up for her and that you have her in hand. But there are some situations where you have to call Blaster Dark without having her effect active, and when that happens, you have to hope that your Blaster Dark doesn't get bottom decked, which it could. It can be very scary. But overall, this list is I like this list a lot. The only thing I'm not a fan of is the ride line, and the reason being is I like the soul that you get out of it. However, I understand why they're doing it. If you go the regular ride line, you can't run this card. You have a chance of like pretty much whiffing your effect off of it. So if you don't want to whiff your effect, Maroon is the way to go. But so I'm not going to a big in-depth analysis about this list. This is just one of the few. This deck I spent way too much time testing, way more than I should have. But basically, this deck goes crazy. Like if you open really well, it's a very strong deck. Now I did say, and this isn't big asterisks. It's if you open really well. When this deck doesn't open very well, it struggles. However, it draws and goes through your deck so fast that you actually be surprised. You could survive for a while. You'll notice they actually are running draws here for this very reason. Some on fronts, but you do need draws to unbrick yourself. When this deck bricks, it's very painful. If you're stuck with a hand of triggers, you basically do nothing. And if you happen to whiff your top 5 under a situation when you're bricking, you're kind of stuck even more. If you don't find this guy in time, you get very stuck. So overall, you really want the draw. And the draw just helps you cycle through better. You know, finding the main helps you kind of go through your deck faster. You really want to utilize where you do stuff. And if you guys are curious, what this deck essentially does is you basically have a crit on Van, and then you also get extra drive checks on Rearguard with Blaster Dark, and it just gets pretty insane. It's like a 4-quad drive with crit pressure on top of numbers. It gets very beefy very fast. This card also stacks on power because you keep attacking with stuff. The deck makes magic numbers. It's very strong for very little basically, and it on top of that it also retires. So on top of the fact that it's also strong, you can also kind of pew some stuff on your opponent's field, especially if you're facing decks like Jet. You can kind of just keep applying pressure and just kind of keep going. You can grade 2 game under this deck too. It doesn't really matter. You can actually hard ride the Blaster Dark and just keep counterblasting and retiring stuff and then getting the twin drive. So this deck can grade 2 game really well. It doesn't need to, but you can do it if you want to. It's another reason why it's good to run the extra Blaster Darks, is you can keep riding them and keep applying pressure that way too. Anyway, long story short, let's go back to the rest. Everything else is kind of the same. Actually, the next 3 are basically exactly the same, except for I'm sure there's a couple changes in their deck list, but it's just Ava, Jet, Overlord, Ava, Jet, Overlord, Ava, Jet, Overlord, basically, just in slightly different seating. But yeah, that's kind of crazy. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not even surprised. I think that is like one of the most ideal team, if you want to go for a team, that's one of the most ideal ones. Ava, Jet something. So basically that's pretty much what these people did, and honestly it works for them. Congrats to everybody. Next we have Premium. I'm a little not as informed in, because I kind of stopped playing it the last 2-ish months because I've been focusing on D and V mainly. However, I do know some stuff, so we'll kind of go over here. We have Bugs. I know Peter, pretty sure, I don't remember if he got 1st place or not, or where he fell on the placement, or if he got 4th. I think he got 4th place. But anyway, Peter, the Bugs man, not so surprising, he's on here, winning very hard. Overall, every deck here all makes sense to me. There's not a single deck that I'm seeing on here that is like, wow, why is that there? All very good contenders, all very strong decks. I'm sure they're all pretty well built, so we're not gonna go too deep into it, but basically you got the Bugs, Stavus, Maidens, you got Bugs, Highlander, Katrina, you got the DP, Highlander, Thavas, and you got the NOK Bugs, Spikes, which is Spikes with Rising Nova probably. All very good stuff. These are all decks that we've seen in the past. It's just that since some stuff got tapped, we're just seeing more of pretty much the same decks, but maybe differently organized. The Steam Maiden deck can be changed with Jet, and you can still play it without the Entrahana, it'd be fine. So there, or whatever the ban is. I don't remember what the exact restriction was. Oh, the restriction was on the on the ride down. But you can still play maidens, it'd be fine. Everything else on here is just, well, Katrina recently got unrestricted, so she's obviously showing up. Highlander is still Highlander, even with the Q-Tire ban. That did literally, as I mentioned in the past, the Q-Tire ban didn't do anything. I'll just keep saying that the Q-Tire ban wasn't the issue. And yeah, the Highlander's still gonna show results. I actually think Highlander's still one of the best decks to format, even with the Q-Tire restriction. I don't think it was quite as hurtful as people may think it was. I think the deck will still perform really well. It can still high roll. If it goes first, it can still just kind of go crazy. It can still do the same thing it was already doing. It just has a harder time finding its pieces, which is more of like it's more like a mid to late game problem, because Q-Tire doesn't even exist for the first part of the game anyway, especially if you're grade 2 gaming. If you're grade 2 gaming, you're not calling Q-Tire. You're calling everything else that's in your deck. You have other cards that will just keep pushing, and you have Reindeer that will keep riding up. Like, it doesn't stop Reindeer from doing Reindeer things. And that's basically kind of just something to kind of keep in mind of that factor. Q-Tire just adds on to the strength of the deck, but it wasn't the issue it wasn't the reason why the deck's so strong. But that's basically premium. Let's go over to V. V actually had a lot more Anj tops than I was expecting. I was expecting more Melody, to be honest with you, but not that, like I mentioned before, Anj was never a bad deck to begin with. Like, it was already strong, and prior to us all knowing about the meat restriction, we knew that Anj was going to be a strong contender, and we knew that Anj would be performing well. So honestly, this all makes sense to me. The first team list, the team in first place, aside from the maidens, which is still crazy to me. I'm still trying to figure out why maidens is topping. I've been testing the decks, and I'm just still confused. But you know, the first and the second, and maybe more so the second, makes more sense to me. Actually, honestly, if you look at all of these, all 4 tops, they're all playing basically meta. I think maidens is the only weird one in this slot, but all the decks in the top 4 slots are all really strong decks. We have the Luard Anj, Luard Pawn, Night Rose, and Leopold package with Davos package, like all really good contenders, all very strong decks. These are all basically meta decks. The maidens I'm not 100% on, because I've spent time on it. It felt a little high rolly, but it wasn't bad. We have some people at locals that play the maidens decks, and they've been not performing too well. Like, honestly, other decks have been doing better, like Davos and Leopold and Anj, and like all the other stuff has been performing better than the maiden stuff. But I don't know, it's been showing results, so so I can't argue with that. But basically, just the usual Luard Anj, etc. I think Luard Anj something, or Luard Pawn something, or like Davos Luard Pawn. Like, specifically the third place team, I would say, is probably the most ideal team. It's actually the team that I was playing with, but you know, we had some hiccups with like other stuff happening. But basically, I think that third place team is like one of the best options. But I will say the second place team is like a really good solid pick as well. If you feel like you want to play less high roll and more consistent, I think pick 2 is really good. And then yeah, so that's basically it. Overall, just really good stuff. There's also Gurgit. People don't really talk about Gurgit as much, but Gurgit actually is still pretty good, even with the Holy Shine engine, or if you choose to go the Ezel engine. That deck's really strong. It was a deck that I was testing a lot prior to competing, so I actually saw a lot of good stuff through it. It felt it feels pretty good. It sounds like it shouldn't feel good, but it's surprisingly no, it does. I actually don't agree with the new promo anymore. I actually think the promo-less version is still better, but that's just my personal thoughts. It is what it is. But long and behold, nice, good job, good stuff. Overall, you're looking at basically the V premium meta right here. There's no other way to put this. This is the meta. And maidens has been showing results to every single I think BSF so far, at least in the EN side. I think had at least one maiden on it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it did in the top 4 slots. So here you go. This is Indonesia. So Indonesia came through. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure WCC's teams, David and Derek, are somewhere in here. I know they got first place somewhere. I don't remember which format to be precise, but congratulations. I know they're somewhere in here. They're in here somewhere. But yeah, so this is D. Honestly, again, straight to a point. The only 2 decks or 3 decks that are a little bit different from the Newark side is the Youthberg, the Leticia, and the Velstra. But again, those decks are also really strong contenders. It's Jet Ava something, right? And here we have basically Jet Ava something. We have one that's a little different with 4th place, which went Jet Overlord something basically. But overall, the kind of the same concept, right? Youthberg, Leticia, Velstra are also very good decks. Like, there's nothing wrong with taking those decks as well. In the 3rd slot, here we have Premium. Again, kind of the same with the exception of the Victor list and like maybe Grand Blue, but even Grand Blue is still like a pretty good pretty good deck right now. So it's not like Granblue's bad. It's just that it kind of struggles into Highlander in my opinion. And I think if the Granblue player sees Highlander, they have a hard time. I just think Excel decks in general are pretty rough for Granblue to overall deal with, but that's just my personal thoughts. That's just what I struggle with, and maybe it's just a me struggle and not like an overall struggle. But overall, still Narukami's here and everything. Overall, just pretty to the point. And actually, I see the WCC there right there. So there's their first place. I will agree. I think first place, what they took is ideal. Originally, I talked about this in the past, but originally when we were competing for Premium BSF Georgia, this was the exact 3 decks that we were gonna take. Pretty much 3 ride down decks. At the time when the Steam Maiden hit wasn't there, we were actually gonna go Highlander, Nightmare Doll, Steam Maidens, and then we had to make some adjustments because of who had to play Highlander, and that's the reason why we made some adjustments. And we actually ended up taking Thalvas over the Nightmare Dolls. That's the only change that happened. But I think that the 3 decks that they took there are very strong, very consistent, very good decks to take. You'd be surprised. Nightmare Dolls actually goes pretty crazy. And originally I was the one that's gonna be a Nightmare Dolls. I do think that whatever first place is playing is ideal. Like personally, I think that is the ideal team. But that's just me. It's just how I feel. Maybe it's a little. Some people feel differently. I know K is like another deck that's been showing a lot of results, and Chaos has been showing results. And at the end of the day, you want to play what you want to play, right? You don't want to play like specific stuff, right? I mean, if you don't like those 3 decks, why play those 3 decks? So, but it's good to see. Glad that we're seeing the results for Premium. And then here's V, and again we are seeing Anj again, which is interesting because like I said, I do still think that Pawn Melody is still just the better choice of the 2. But like I said, consistency is pretty important too, and Pawn bricks. And when Pawn bricks, you have a very low likelihood of coming through, whereas Anj does not have that problem. So sometimes, the consistent pick is the better pick. It is interesting to see Duke on here. I love Duke to death, so seeing it on here makes me super happy. Jewel Knights is another contender on the side that's actually pretty good. It's one of those decks where when it pops off. It can randomly OTK you out of the game. Very strong. Fenrir is still a really good pick. Messiah's not too bad, and Rose we're obviously seeing as well, because Rose has been kind of in the same spot this whole time. It's never been a bad pick. It's just never been the best pick. But overall, honestly, again, the only weird one is Duke. And we can take a look at Duke real quick, because the other decks we've just seen so many times. I know some people have different lists and stuff like that, but we've seen the concept of the deck a lot. So sorry if I'm not going through all the lists here, but we've looked through some of these decks so many times over the last 3 years that it's like, how many times can you look at an Anj list? But let's see. I'm sure they kept it pretty standard, and they did keep it pretty standard with the exception of this one card here. And your opponent must interest as much as possible. So basically a little front row board wiper. This is actually really good into Melody. Surprisingly enough, so if they face Melody, they probably had a party. Because it's like, oh, you have to intercept. There goes all your shield. Goodbye. But overall, Duke is actually quite powerful. You'll notice they're not running Heal Guardians, which actually makes sense. Duke wants damage because then they stay at high damage and they constantly have the triple drive. And then on top of this card right here, which forces you to be at 5 damage, you actually don't want, you actually want to take early damage. So you want to be at higher damage the whole game, and you want to just sit there and just triple drive turn after turn, and your opponent gets put in a really weird spot where they kind of have to. So honestly, the 20k shield is actually better than the Heal Guardians. It's a really rare time. The only thing is that losing Percival kind of slowed down the pace of the deck, but you still have this card that kind of helps out. And you can play for the late game, take early damage, and then just keep triple driving with the crit and just make your opponent suffer basically. And that's pretty much what this deck does. Overall, just honestly, it's very strong. It's strong in the category that it's in. It's a good deck. I wouldn't expect this deck to be up here in first place, but the deck can go crazy. This card is a dumb card. This card is so strong. Losing Percival hurts, but man, it doesn't change the fact that the card itself is strong. And then the on-ride off of this is actually really good as well. So overall, just the deck just exists. The deck does its thing. So here we have the Italy. This is Premium Italy results. And again, kind of aside from the Battle Sisters, though we have seen Battle Sisters, I think, pop up in a couple other stuff. Overall, this all makes sense. This all makes sense. Again, we're seeing pretty much the same decks, but just more diverse. We're just seeing them all in different places, which says just how diverse the format is right now. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not too sure. But overall, we're seeing the same kind of concept. Got the Narakamis, got the Maidens, got the Highlanders, got the Nightmare Dolls, got the NOKs, the DP, and a little touch of that Link Joker and Rogue Battle Sister spice, just because certain shield value gets kind of awkward, and Battle Sisters can pretty much cheese wins that way. So really good stuff. But I'm not gonna. We already kind of saw a lot of this stuff, so I'm not gonna go super deep. But congratulations. And then here we have V again. Anj performing. What happened to Pawn? Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe Anj is still the better deck. It's funny because prior to Meep, I was like, yeah, just play Anj, and I mean, it's good to hear the results. But we do see that this is, I believe, Revengers here in first place. This is a very interesting first place, not as commonly seen, but nothing, not as what you would expect to see as often. But everything else is about the same. We do have the Vanquisher as well, which Vanquisher is actually really good. These are Vanquishers that's a little high roll right now. It's a little slow into some certain situations, but it's still a good contender. Messiah is good too. I don't know if you guys know, but there's actually a promo that came out for Messiah. It lets you draw like 4 cards a turn off of this like locking effect you do. It's actually a very cracked promo, and I think people have been sleeping on it. The amount of drawing you can do is like insane, on top of, you know, the Valko crit pressure that you can apply. I'm not going to dig too deep. Battles is a huge garbage trick that's hard to deal with, and Revengers just is like Overlord but different. Just constant pressure of rewriting. Instead of restanding or rewriting your Vanguard, and it's just the force markers get pretty insane, then the numbers get pretty high, and it can just kind of like high roll you out of the game before you can play the game, which is strong because sometimes that's just how it is. You play decks like Orange, and then you get like rolled out of the game before you can play the game with decks like Revengers. So VANGUARD also suffers to decks like this because they just can't guard early fast enough to deal with the pressure. So that's basically that. And isn't there D? Did I miss D? There is no D. It always said, what's D? So it looks like we're still missing info. Okay, they're still missing info on D. This was 15 hours ago. It hasn't been updated. So that is it for Italy's side of things. So that's basically the results. I talked a lot during this results video, more than I expected to actually. So I hope some of the information that I provided in this specific video kind of helps you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of fun stuff, or 50cards.shop for code orange and all that kind of fun stuff. Like I said, I really hope this helped you. I think it did. I think a lot of the stuff I talked about here is pretty much all the stuff that I've been testing, all the stuff that I've seen, and just stuff in general. I know I didn't go into like every deck log situation, but I think everything I described was pretty on par in terms of information that you may need. If you're still competing and all that stuff, this is definitely valuable information. So I do hope it helps you in your tops and all that kind of fun stuff as BSF starts wrapping up or are getting towards the end of the season. So on that, guys, peace out. That's the video. I'll see you guys in a future video. Bye.